Very short. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Well, if we have anyone who comes in late, we can at least get started. Going to open the meeting with attendance and roll call. Gene Estino. I see you. I do not hear you.
Gina Stino, present.
Excellent. Mike Barclay.
Mike Barclay, present.
Mark Cameron.
Mark Cameron, present.
Fran Collins.
Present.
Diane Kennedy. Not here. Mark Maggi.
Present.
Mary McGoldrick.
Present.
And Meg Wheeler. We don't have Meg yet. Okay. We have Tom Callahan here, and our principal task is to talk about the and hopefully vote on recommendations relating to zoning articles. But just to stick to our agenda very briefly, can Chris just give us the 122nd version of sort of where the other articles are, well, all the articles are at in terms of boards whose votes are expected, et cetera?
So select board is complete, advisory is complete, except for the zoning. Capital has voted on the courts project for CPC and the police and fire station. They voted yes on both of those. They have not voted on the town hall project or the stabilization funds, either one of them, or the preliminary feasibility study. So the warrant should hit everybody's houses this weekend. It's gonna be a beast. It's gonna look like a catalog because this Tom Callahan filled it with 70 pages of zoning materials. So it looks much more dense than it really is. That said, inside the warrant are somewhat more robust descriptions than there usually are. There's actually a QR code in there, which lets people link back to the town website if they want to learn about all the projects. And that page was updated today with the special town election information, letting people know how they can vote on the 18th. So I think we're in pretty good shape. There's some FAQs to be added. That said, the warrant is, again, it hits everybody's homes, hopefully this weekend. And then the meeting is all set to go.
Great. So then this is assuming I actually have zoning on for this meeting and our next meeting 2 weeks from now provisionally, but I am hopeful that we won't need both. I watched the community discussion forum on Monday, which was a wonder of efficiency. The discussion was up and down in 50 minutes, give or take. And we may have more or less or similar questions for Tom, but having seen that, I'm incentivized to hopefully get us through this tonight, if unless there's some major question that we need to revisit in 2 weeks. So that's, I'm sorry.
I don't see why we can't.
Great. So with that said, Tom, I think it was helpful when you gave, and I don't know which of my colleagues had a chance to either see live sort of the purpose of what, the larger zoning project, et cetera, and then came down into the details of these two, the two warrant articles, which are dealing with chapters, articles of the zoning bylaw. So I'm going to turn it over to you for some explanation, and then maybe we'll do, whatever order you think is best. And when we, kind of get through your summaries, we'll open the floor for questions and discussion by the members of the committee. So all you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, members of the committee. Good evening. It's unfortunate that at that community thing, we didn't have a great deal of attendance. Everybody who was in the room, the 6 or so, 7 people were all inside baseball players, I mean, from different boards. And I guess you were one of the 8, Rob, that was on Zoom, but we didn't have any public questions, and that's been unusual, I think, compared to the last time. We haven't had a lot of public comment and input at the planning board's formal hearing or at any other stage of this process. But in any event, this is the next step in the complete overhaul of the bylaw. We did some changes last spring. We have these for the fall. We will have many more changes for next spring. Probably will even go into fall of 24. Right? Fall of 24 would probably be if we have any kind of new initiatives regarding climate resiliency and climate change and environmental related things. So for this is dealing with Article 4, which is our table, our article that governs the use regulations and the table of uses. And then it is the first step in Article 5, which is our area and dimensional regulations. The reason for the length of them, so what's going to be distributed in the warrant is going to be both the full text of both articles, as well as these summaries that you've been given. The summaries are going to be the documents we use for presentation at town meeting. And beyond my introduction, it'll probably be Judge Cutler from KP Law that's going to do the presentations for us, since she's the primary author of these things. We now are the last 2 articles of the night. I hope we hold a quorum, and if not, we'll have to go to Tuesday to deal with these things. I've made it clear to the select board it would greatly upset the schedule if we had to postpone these all to the spring. But anyway, so Article 4, the reason of the length is that Article 4 is completely rewritten top to bottom, and it just wasn't subject to doing a quick red line for comparison. However, in the summary at the last few pages, we do provide a before and after listing of our uses and how they're being changed. When KP Law came on and Judge Cutler came on, and for those who don't know, Judge Cutler is a former chief judge of the land court and an expert in these kinds of matters. They did what's called a diagnostic. That's what we refer to it as, of the entire bylaw, article by article, pointing out its problems, pointing out where it could use cleaning up, pointing out its inconsistencies, pointing out where it's in some places not consistent with current state law. Article 4, as much as we tack on different things to the bylaw over the years, we have done a lot of that, and the bylaw is a mess. And I've said this before, and part of this is to reorganize it and bring it up to date. We've been told by experts we should be looking at our bylaw every 5 to 10 years. Article 4 probably hasn't been substantively looked at since the last time anything was changed in it since 1986. Same with Article 5. So it's well overdue. And so the judge's diagnostic, I think the longest section was regarding Article 4 because of the overall mess that she found it in. So the changes, you could call them organizational, you could call them substantive, but it's mainly, I would say, organizational. Is that, first of all, we are taking and making a clear distinction between primary uses, accessory uses, and temporary uses. We do not do that in our existing bylaw. We are moving the table, which has been an appendix and is sometimes hard for people to find, into the actual text of the article itself to make it easier to use. And then our current bylaw has got an excruciatingly long list of uses, and we are shortening that quite a bit. There are those who say we can shorten it even further, that we still have some uses in there that you'll never see in this town ever again. But, again, as we discussed Monday night, and Woody Chittick made the good point, is that this is a work in progress, and there's nothing that prevents us from continuing to update and to tweak. But we are taking a great step towards simplifying it by going to more broader categories of uses rather than having a nitpicking list. And there was an example years ago of a business on 3A. It's across from Stop and Shop. Won't name it, but we had one kind of related use and not the other, and they had to go to court and go through a process to get that changed in order to open and operate. Using broader category of uses is going to give us a little bit more flexibility. The building inspector who makes the initial determination, and then the zoning board on any appeal, to allow a use, since we find ourselves being away from the highway and with a notion on one side of being in a kind of a beggar can't be chooser position with respect to encouraging commercial development in town. So those are the big structural changes. That it's just the organization of it, and it was just done in such a way that you just couldn't redline over the existing. You had to redo it from top to bottom. We are also this article is going to has 3 parts to it that will all be voted on together. The first part is the changes to Article 4 itself. The second part are changes to Article 2 definitions that result from these changes in terminology, losing some terms we're no longer going to use. And then the third part is which is also was a goal of this process, is to start consolidating some of the articles we've added on over the years that really relate to uses and consolidate them into this one place, and to put all use related articles into Article 4. And so to that end, Article 15, which is our provision about accessory dwelling units, is being moved into and consolidated into Article 4. And it is in that particular area, accessory dwelling units, that we had a lot of debate, especially with the zoning board, and are making a couple of substantive changes. As Woody pointed out the other night, in the 22 years of that bylaw's existence, there's been one application. We know that there's accessory dwelling units in towns, just whether they predate the bylaw or what, we don't know, but it's not being used. And one of the biggest criticisms of it was that it is, in the way it's currently written, you can put one inside the main house only, and you could not alter the exterior appearance of the house in any way. There's also a provision that once the original applicant for the permit either dies or sells the property, the permit goes away. And so now you have a unit that can't legally be used as an accessory unit. So we've done a couple of things. Number one, we've added language that would allow, we haven't changed the minimum size of such a unit and the minimum size of the main house. But if you're going to put an accessory dwelling unit in the main house, you will be able to make an addition or alter the exterior to accommodate that. Number two, we are going to allow accessory dwelling units to be developed in accessory buildings, such as standalone garages or sheds, or it could be a standalone structure itself, a new structure. And the third major change is we are taking off that cap of the loss of the permit once the original applicant leaves the property. And so the permit will now run with the land. And so once developed, it can continue to be used by a subsequent owner. What we have kept in are 2 caps. One being that there can be no more than 10 permits for these in a year. And 2, that the whole bylaw is sunsetted once we get to 10% of our total housing units being accessory dwellings. That was put in because traditionally, suburban towns would only want to have on a single family lot 1 dwelling. And so rather than have a proliferation of now properties with 2 dwellings on them, we put those caps in. There are those who are advocating we remove those caps, and we may very well do those come spring or next year once we see how these changes free up the process more and make the development of accessory dwelling units more attractive. We learned on Monday night from Woody, and then I looked it up afterwards, that the governor has a new package regarding a housing package of proposed legislation And have to read the fine points of it, but one of the objectives is apparently to make accessory dwelling units available as of right. So the changes we are doing here to make it more attractive or more available for use may be changed by state law in a short period of time. We don't know, and we'll have to adapt to that when it happens. But I think that's a reflection that the Commonwealth still needs affordable housing, and maybe the traditional notion of worrying about just one dwelling per lot is not something we should be worrying about as much as we used to. So that is a major substantive change. The other substantive change is the common driveway regulations, which are currently in Article 7, which deals with off-street parking. That is, we consider a form of use. We're bringing that into Article 4 as well. And we are changing the one aspect of the regulation. We are not changing any of the dimensional aspects of common driveways, but we are going to limit the number of lots that can be served by a common driveway to 4. Which is more a norm with everybody around us. We currently allow up to 8, and we are a true outlier in that. There's no one even close to that. So we're bringing that into conformity with what goes on in other towns, suburban towns, and certainly around us. The other main feature about Article 4 is that the Attorney General's office is very keen on making sure we have provisions in here to allow for solar energy uses. Our solar energy bylaw, which is Article 20, only regulates large scale developments, commercial, industrial scale solar installations, and we only allow them on 2 properties in town. We have an overlay district for it. While people have developed solar panels on their roofs, we haven't specifically allowed that in the bylaw. That is now being allowed. And that's something the Attorney General wants to see. And we're also allowing for the possibility of a ground-mounted solar installation on a residential scale. I've often given an example. If anybody goes up and down River Street between Norwell and Hanover, as I do every day, there's a house that has a very large yard, and rather than have panels on the roof, they have panels on a framework in their big yard. That is the kind of thing that we now will permit within certain dimensional boundaries, but that is something that the Attorney General has wanted to see, and has threatened towns that if you make changes and don't include these solar provisions, I will approve the whole bylaw. So they're in there, and that's the only other real substantive change to Article 4, to basically allow what we've been allowing as a matter for a long time. So I'll take any questions on Article 4. I mean, there really isn't, it's a lot of material because it's being rewritten from top to bottom, but the changes are fairly easy to explain. It's really a major organizational reorientation of making broader categories of uses and then clearly defining primary and accessory uses, which we do not do in our current bylaw.
Thanks, Tom. I've got some questions, but I go last, or I go later. I saw Fran first, then Mike.
When you started talking about accessory dwellings, I think you said there was only going to be so many per year. I didn't get what you said, but that first.
All right, well, our current bylaw says that you can only have up to 10 permits of these per year. And then there's an overall sunsetting that if accessory dwellings were to reach 10% of our total housing stock, then the bylaw would be sunsetted. And that was done in deference to the traditional wish not to have multiple dwellings on a single residential lot. Unless, of course, you're doing multifamily zoning, but that's not what this is. We're keeping those 2 caps in for the moment to see if the other changes and the increased availability will encourage more permitting of these things. At the planning board hearing, there was a question from somebody in the public about how these would get built, other zoning requirements, lot area, setbacks, frontage, all of that still applies. It's not like everybody in town is going to be able to develop an accessory dwelling unit, but we've had 1 permit in 22 years. there's a clear and identifiable reason that it isn't being used, and we're trying to change that and expand the availability for their development.
Thanks, Tom.
And we'll see, you know, and if those caps don't make any sense, I mean, I'll tell you that the people on the zoning board are advocating we get rid of them, but then and we are going to have a survey about that to hand out at town meeting, because we want to get the town's feedback. Do they want to go to in the direction of allowing, 2 dwelling units on a single residential lot? If the town's favor doing that, we'll do that. And as I said, the state may be making that decision for us, for all we know.
Okay, Mike?
Hey, Tom, thanks for all your work on this. This is a monstrous undertaking. I guess, one of the things that to me always seems to derail zoning articles at town meeting is, people who get up and say, this is taking stuff away from us. And so I guess, how, is anything really being
No.
taken away at the, in the beginning, and how can you, succinctly articulate, make sure to articulate that right up front, just to kind of cut that whole line of conversation off?
Yeah, I mean, very simply, there's no use that we currently prohibit that is going to be allowed. So you won't see adult use zoning or adult uses all over town. You won't see retail marijuana anywhere. And we are not prohibiting anything that we allow to this point. It's simply a reorganization of things to make it easier. And, again, the laundry list we have now was used to stop what is now a kennel on 3A, because we had one dog-related use was allowed and another wasn't. And so, it was so nitpickingly crazy that we just would say, a dog-related use is a kennel, it's a hospital, it's, it can be a lot of different things. So that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to make it easier. And, and if there's any questions about determination if a use is allowed, the building inspector makes that first cut, and there's an appeal process to the zoning board that's always existed. So that'll still apply.
Yeah, that was my second question, I guess. In developing broader definitions, is the sort of appeal process exactly the same? And it sounds like it is.
Yeah, if you remember, the quote unquote use variance was taken away, got slipped into kind of sneakily in a town meeting like in 2001. We brought it back a couple of town meetings ago. And this going to more broader categories kind of addresses the same principles, basically giving the building inspector and the zoning board some flexibility to allow various types of commercial uses. Because again, we're trying, as small as our commercial tax base is, it's important to us, and we're trying to keep a viable commercial district on 3A and the harbor and the village all at the same time. So we want to encourage any kind of business that wants to come here as much as possible.
Great, thank you.
Anyone else? I can jump in, and if other people cogitate on some comments or questions, they can feel free to jump in as well. So, Tom, I'm trying to remember some of the difficulties we had at prior meetings with zoning bylaw updates that got sort of sideswiped at town meeting. And when you were talking about not auxiliary dwellings, common drives and a limit on how many lots they can serve, I have a memory that was an issue a couple of years ago. And I guess the question is on that issue is two. One is, have there been, in all the various meetings, forums, hearings, etc., that you have conducted so far, has there been any public comment on that, positive or negative, or issues raised that we ought to hear summarized and think about ourselves? And second, do we? No. Okay.
All right, but I'll explain that further, but no.
Okay. And then my second question, maybe you can knock them down both at once, is do we know whether out there on paper there are any lots that will be negatively affected by this change. Does that quit? And if the question doesn't make sense, please feel
Oh, you
free
mean
to include that in your answer.
that particular change? Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
that we know of, that I mean, that someone has some sort of a paper plan out there that has 7 lots off a common driveway, and they're going to get gored by this straight away. It's not a reason not to do
no,
it, but I'm just
no,
wondering what's out there.
I'm not aware of any. There's one, the planning board, we're dealing with a couple of different applications and litigation on a road down by the harbor. So that won't be adversely affected by this because they're going in the direction of a subdivision. So that'll
Yeah,
that
that's a
won't be a
different ballgame.
concern. I'm not aware of any others. I'll
Okay.
tell you, we have been meeting very frequently, including 4 times in August, which might be a record for a board meeting in the summertime. And it's been somewhat disappointing that we have not had, I would say, any public input. I watch, who's on the participants, very little attendance. Nobody from the development community, so who knows who's going to get up. But, in the past, Woody's listening out there, he knows what I think. The zoning board has been difficult. They ask the most probing questions. They ask about some more obscure topics like this. I mean, I say common driveways are obscure because nobody's really discussed it a lot. It hasn't been controversial to anyone. And we have the data that shows how much of an outlier we are. But the zoning board, they for various reasons, their vote isn't going to occur till the 7th. But they're on board with everything. I'm not expecting Woody or Dave, as they did in the spring, to get up and ask some kind of gotcha question at the last moment. So, we had a unanimous on our planning board, which we did not have last spring. The select board was 3-0. They all weren't in attendance. I expect 5-0 at town meeting. I expect the zoning board to be 5-0, maybe 4-1. But this one hasn't been a big issue. And
Okay, that's I'm sort of cheating on our review by trying to piggyback on anyone else's objections, and if there aren't any.
Yeah, I would only speculate as a lawyer that, there is some grandfathering that applies. And I think if somebody has already legally existing lots, they would probably have some grandfathering rights with regard to constructing a common driveway. There may be other reasons why they can't do it, but I think if anybody post the official effective date of these articles who are creating new lots, they'd be subject to this new regulation.
And that would be, I mean, given lot size requirements,
Yeah,
the idea of being able to put together a parcel with 5 or more new lots out of thin air is in the nature of they're not making any more cohasset to do that with. So.
And the controversy in the past wasn't at town meeting. It's that on the planning board, we were discussing new regulations to look at means of residential access altogether. And,
that may have been it.
Yeah, we borrowed something from Plymouth where they regulate the kinds of roads that are not common driveways, but also not official subdivision roads, with sort of a gap in our regulation. And we will revisit that at some point, but it's not now. But we, and there's other things about common driveways. They're also allowed to be 750 feet long. That is an outlier distance as well. Compared to towns around us. It's 350 would be more the norm, but but we're not addressing that at this point in time. So,
well, if it's any consolation, Tom, I listened to almost every one of your meetings, except I listened to them after the fact. So, so those, when you go to YouTube and there's been 4 views, that one of them's me, which is more than we get on YouTube views. So, we get ones of views. It's great. All right. The other question is just, in addition to the common driveway issue, with respect to this article, were there any other substantive comments or objections that we ought to know about or consider?
No, I'll tell you very frankly that a couple of the members of the zoning board think we should throw out those 2 caps on accessory dwelling units and basically let them happen wherever, and however many happen.
Okay,
And
but this
again,
is,
and then Monday night, Woody brought up the fact, and it is brand new, and then I went and looked at it too. The governor has proposed a housing package that includes having ADUs as of right. So that may change it. That may throw the caps out for us,
so okay, well, I have a.
But
have
we
a
wanted to
building
take an interim step. On the committee, we decided we wanted to take more of an interim step. Let's make the availability of where they can go easier. And then let's see if we really run into the problems with the caps. I don't
Okay.
think we will. But.
Yeah, I have some practical questions about them, but they're personal, and I'm not going to take up the committee's time with that. But
Yeah, well, all the
actually,
other
I'm not going
rules.
to take your time up with it either.
No,
so.
all the other
So,
rules, and all the other zoning rules and the impediments, like for my own house, the impediment is my septic system.
Yeah.
Not my zoning, it's my septic system. Those all still exist. So like these aren't going to get developed on every lot in town, so.
No. Okay. All right. Does anybody else have any questions concerning this article? Hearing none. Why don't we let's move on and oh wait, Mary, sorry. I didn't mean
I
to
don't,
be
I don't
preemptive.
have a question. I just wanted to thank you, Tom, for the work. The summaries are terrific. It was actually kind of fun to read the, except the uses. That was a hoot and holler. I would have loved to have known where we processed our own dry cleaning and things like that in town. But
Yeah, I
just,
mean, you have to prepare for them. So that was, I was saying too, Rob, if you heard Monday's hearing, Woody brought up some other uses that are still in there that
Yeah.
have been historic uses that we're never going to see again. So,
Horse racing, which
Horse
I
racing,
would
I get it.
support.
Yeah,
But
there's still some whittling down. My original version of this would have whittled it down a lot more, but again, we're taking steps to not make super radical change all at once.
bulk petrol storage and a couple of other things that not only do we not have, but we would prefer not necessarily to have.
Right.
Okay. Anything further on this article? Then Tom, why don't you move us over to the next
we
one.
did have bulk petroleum storage, and we did have
yes.
dry cleaners, in-house dry cleaners. So that stuff, it's been here. It's not likely to come back again, but it's
Not likely, but and that's why you should have it in your bylaw to be prepared for whatever eventuality.
Yeah. Yeah, you take an environmental law case and you read nothing but cases about dry cleaning factories. They were incredibly polluting.
Yeah.
So all right.
Ask the people in downtown Chatham. There's a very famous leak underneath downtown Chatham from dry cleaning. Anyway,
All right.
digress.
Well, moving on.
Okay, so Article 5 is the article that deals with our area and dimensional regulations.
Now,
And
just to be
again,
clear, I don't mean to interrupt, but well, I guess I do because I am, but just so everybody on the committee knows, the final warrant in the as it was mailed out was posted on the town website, and about 10 minutes ago, I just emailed it to everybody on the committee. So when we do vote, we'll be voting on the articles as they appear in that final warrant. So if you want to refer to it, you all have it in your inbox. I'm sorry, Tom, carry on.
no, I think they're now 13 and 14 or 14 and 15, whatever. We got stuck at the end behind all those juicy money articles, and half the meeting's going to walk out. So Article 5 is the area and dimensions, and most of the changes here are, again, organizational, cleaning it up, and a lot of the terminology changes are being generated by the changes to Article 4. We will be probably revisiting Article 5 in the spring when we decide, and no decisions have been made, whether we're going to address actual dimensional limits such as frontage, setbacks, house size, things of that nature. We are not doing that here. We have one dimensional thing that I'll mention, but we are also taking the table that's in the appendix, again, moving it into the text of the bylaw itself, renaming it the table of dimensional regulations instead of area regulations. There are related changes to Article 2 definitions that these changes make, getting rid of terms, adding terms, so everything is clean and consistent. The substantive changes that are being made at this time is that we have clarified the regulation of setbacks when you're dealing with a corner lot and what clearances are needed for sightlines. And we're actually going to add a sketch. And as we go forward, we're thinking about, like other towns do, adding a lot more illustrative sketches to the bylaw than we have right now. On height, we do not currently have a height limit on accessory structures, such as a standalone garage. We are putting in a height limit of 25 feet. The overall height limit, the universal height limit in town is 35 feet. So this would be 25 feet for a structure or an accessory structure, shed, standalone garage, and that would be including if it has an accessory dwelling on top of it. And that should be plenty of space to do both an accessory dwelling and have a garage. With respect to the ground-mounted solar, such as that structure I mentioned that's on River Street in Norwell, we put in a height limit of 12 feet. So we're not dealing with some large industrial scale type of solar array. The other thing is in large house review. If any of you are familiar with large home review, we've had it in place, I think, since 2005. It was a response to growing trend of mansionization that was going on. And many people come to the meetings and think it's a process where the planning board can say yes or no to a proposal for a large house. It is not. It is the equivalent to a commercial site plan review. We have a few criteria that we want to see that's addressed: traffic, lighting, landscaping, and scale in relation to the neighborhood. So we can condition it, but we can't say yes or no to some of it. What we do with that may change in the spring. There's a sentiment, mine included, to get rid of it and switch to a different kind of process of dealing with very large size houses. But in the meantime, while it's still here, we are making a couple of tweaks to it. Number one, we are expanding what is included in the definition of residential gross floor area. That's a definition that only applies to this process. And the reason we are bringing in more area into it is that we are increasingly seeing houses with very large scale accessory buildings and 4 to 6, even more car garages. So we're capturing more space into what's going to trigger the review. The trigger threshold is currently 3,500 square feet. Because of the change in the definition, we are increasing the trigger to 4,000 square feet. So we will take out a good number of projects that the planning board reviews, but we are seeing a lot of projects that are 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 square feet plus. I think we have a 9,000 one pending at the moment.
And those are for secondary dwelling buildings? That's the size on secondary buildings?
It's including more area within it to capture some of these large scale secondary buildings.
That's okay. That's right. Okay.
We're seeing really large garages and multiple car garages.
No, it's hard for me to wrap my head around a 9,000 square foot secondary building. I'm sorry. Thanks.
Oh, no. This is including everything, the whole building. We're just capturing more of the space that is being developed into the definition towards the trigger, but then correspondingly raising the trigger threshold a bit. And again, this is, if large home review survives in its current form, this will be what we do. We can continue to tweak it, but if it disappears, this will be here for 6 months. But that hasn't been decided yet. That's on, substantive dimensional changes to Article 5 is the next topic that our committee is going to tackle for the spring. And there's ideas, but there's been no direction one way or the other on anything. So that's pretty much it. You can see it's a 1-page summary, much simpler. Again, most of it is housekeeping and organization that is driven by just cleaning it up and making it easier to read and to use, and that by the changes that are being generated by changes in terminology in Article 4.
Questions?
I don't have much else to add to it. I'm sorry.
Mary?
Just as a matter of course, Tom, if these bylaws or changes to these bylaws pass, especially as it refers to the large house plan review and the height restriction for accessory buildings on a property.
Mhm.
If something's already been approved, it does not need to go back in, right?
No.
Or does it?
No.
Okay.
No, it's grandfathered. Oh, sorry, it's grandfathered has fallen out of favor, I'm told. It's would
Oh,
be a
yes. we had that
pre-
discussion.
pre-existing allowed you, I don't know what they're calling it now, but can't use grandfathering, it's politically incorrect.
You know, we're gonna use 5 words where we used to use 1, but it's the right thing to do. So there you go.
Anyone else? Specific questions? I have a couple. All right, then I'll jump in. So if I followed you, and I think I did, but correct me if I'm wrong, the rule regarding dimensions of secondary buildings in which there may be auxiliary dwellings is going to be 25 feet, where the height limitation on primary residential buildings is 35.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
What's the thinking there, and have you had any comment on that difference? There was a
Yes.
robust discussion prior to the last town meeting about some height requirements. So I'm
Right,
curious.
when we changed the definition of height, and that we're now measuring to the peak of a pitched roof. There hasn't been any real substantive discussion about it. Of my fellow ZBC and planning board member who opposed the definition change did not object to it. Back then, we did discuss needing to put in some limit for accessory dwellings, because I think the general sentiment is that we don't want to see an accessory dwelling, accessory building, a garage or a shed be as tall as a house and be up to the maximum of 35 feet.
I mean, and I say this out of curiosity, not out of criticism, but isn't that making a value judgment rather than a zoning judgment? I mean, I have an auxiliary building. It's been out there for 100 years. I'm pretty sure it's more than 25 feet from the peak to the ground. Pre-existing, thank you. I'll keep it. But if I wanted to build that, and given the, I know it's a much more sophisticated rule. I mean, you may know where I live. I'm on Norfolk Road, so my lot goes like this.
Yeah.
So I know you've incorporated much more sophisticated ways to find the mean height and things like that, given some transgressions in the past. But I couldn't build that building now. And, peeling 8 or 9 feet off the roof line would make putting an accessory dwelling in there very difficult.
Well, actually, it wouldn't, because
Okay.
no, because I think the general measurement for a floor is considered, if it's not 8 feet, it's no more than 10. A garage doesn't need to be more than 8 to 10 feet high, and then you have 15 feet for a dwelling unit if you want to put one up there, and that's plenty.
But
it's
okay.
not intended to be a 2-story luxury townhouse. It's intended to be an accessory dwelling unit that has a size limit.
Well, what it is a restriction on, and I'm realizing to
Uh-uh.
sound all kinds of libertarian here, which I'm really actually kind of not, but it's a restriction on, a landowner's right to do with their land what they want, and it's
But
lopping
they don't
10
have
feet
that
off of
right,
it.
Rob. I'll argue with you to death with that
Well,
as an attorney. That
I suppose, I can, our natural, our
no, I
natural and
understand what
God-given
you're
rights
saying.
to build a chicken rendering plant in our backyard. I get
know.
it. I took the zoning course. All right, I'm with you. I just was wondering if there's any kind of
zoning is a restriction, and
Yeah.
every one of the limits that our town puts in versus what other towns put in, because we all have some slight differences, is a value judgment that a particular town makes.
Sure.
For example, in frontage, we made a value judgment in 1969. For what reason, nobody is around to tell us anymore.
Oh,
But
France.
we went from traditional suburban frontages of 100 foot or better to 50-foot city frontage. And that has led to a certain kind of development pattern. And we have to make we're going to make a value judgment of whether that's the right way to go and to continue to go, or do we go back to zoning like a suburban town zones? you know,
I
everything is a value judgment in one
yeah,
sense.
and my question was really, it isn't that I oppose it because I don't, but you know, I was more curious whether kind of A, what the thinking was, which you articulated, and B, whether anyone else has stirred that particular pot. And it sounds like not, which is
No.
fine. I mean, the
No, and,
smoother this goes, the
not from
better.
the usual suspects that from last spring you would have suspected.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. Well, I
No.
guess it's been said the advisory committee has done its job by articulating an issue, and I'm not gonna use up people's time with it. I got a
Yeah.
couple more, but I see Fran's hand.
Yeah, if Rob's barn burns down and he wants to build a new barn and the old barn was 32 feet high, can he build a 32-foot high barn?
Then he's gonna fall under Article 8 of reconstruction of a pre-existing non-conforming use.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Yeah.
I think
And
that's
and
what the
then,
answer I was looking
Yeah, yeah, that's time. I think it's time limited. You have to do it within a certain period of time, generally.
Yeah, you usually have
according to
two,
Glasses bylaws.
yeah, if something is, I was just actually looking at this for a friend who had to go in front of the Bridgewater zoning board. Usually you have 2 years and something burns down to replace it. And
Yeah, I've
then, what you can't do is increase the non-conformity. So if you were 32 feet, you're not going to 35
Yes.
feet. You're
Yeah,
gonna stay at 32. You know,
That's
and
my
then,
understanding of it,
and then it's
too.
a special permit standard of review, which is it substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood? Yeah,
than it was for the 100 years prior. Yeah.
right. I
Um,
don't think you'd have a problem.
I had one other question, mostly because I didn't know it existed, but there's a change to the corner clearance bylaw or a portion of the bylaw.
Yeah.
I did not know we had it, and I have two questions. One is, who enforces that? And is anyone out there doing same? Because there are some blind corners around town. And second, can you describe, because I read the change, I thought I kind of understood it, but I'd rather hear you explain it than ask an intelligent question than just blunder into it. So A,
Yeah.
who enforces, and B, what's the short version of how it works?
All right, well, it was the judge who flagged it as she was going through all the bylaw. None of us caught this. And she just thought it was not clear and that we needed some clear direction of what the setback requirements are on a corner lot with respect to sightlines. Like any other thing that's being built, it's up to the building inspector to do the enforcement and get out in the field and do that kind of stuff.
But
Obviously-
does it include things like hedges? Or is it just walls and fences?
Well, I
You
think
know,
it-
I don't want to
yeah,
play
no,
Mr.
I think-
Quizit.
I think we
But
may have discussed that to some point where I think it can be if it obstructs a view. But again, most of the properties in Cohasset have developed a long time ago. And again, this is going to apply going forward to new construction and to new development.
oh, okay.
It's
all right.
again, you don't go in and take a new bylaw and then just tell everybody who's now not in compliance, you have to comply. That's not how it works. So it wouldn't work that way. But like any other, you know, somebody builds a new house and the setback's supposed to be 20 feet. It's up to the building inspector to go out there. You know, they'll show us it's 20 feet on a plan, but then somebody has to go out in the field and make sure they put it at 20 feet.
Okay, then that satisfies me.
That gets, you
Yeah.
know, enforcement is a whole nother issue, you know, that
Yeah.
you have to, but you have to put them on paper first, so.
Okay. Fran?
Yeah, I had another question about setbacks. I didn't see this addressed in the proposed bylaw, but in my neighborhood, most of the houses are built right on the street, so none of us meet, well, not none of us, but most of us don't meet setback requirements. And I have been led to believe that because if pre-existing
Mhm.
nonconformities and setbacks, that if somebody else wanted to build a house on an adjacent lot, for instance, they wouldn't have to follow that same setback thing. Does that have any veracity?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're pre-existing non-conforming. And if you were to put an addition to your house or tear it down and build something new, you couldn't make your non-conformity as to the setback any greater. So let's say, for example, the setback at your house is 10 feet and you're 8 feet to the line. You couldn't rebuild or expand and go to 6 feet. You could stay at the 8 feet. Now, if your neighbor is an empty lot, it's not developed, they're gonna have to comply with the current setbacks.
Okay, well, that's my question. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Tom, not to belabor it, but the supplemental regulations, section 300-5.4, it kind of caught my eye because it refers to a fence and a wall, but it also refers to a hedge. Are hedges buildings? Are they subject to the jurisdiction of the? I mean, it seemed to me that the sightlines thing is a public safety issue. You want to be able to see around corners.
Let me just see where you are.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it's 300-5.4. Page 46 of the current warrant.
Yeah, subsection E.
Subsection E, correct.
Yeah, so that, again, that's with the corner lot.
Yeah,
So
But-
it's probably the only place where a hedge is regulated because it's a sight line and safety issue. Which
okay.
is one of the allowed purposes of zoning to deal
And
with.
prior to this proposed amendment, we had a sightline provision and we're changing it. I'm just curious what the pre-exist.
Well,
what the,
as the judge explained it to us that it was clarifying it, and she just thought it needed some cleaning up. But let me just see what we have. Handy and battered and torn bylaw. Yeah, we have it right now. It's in 5.2G in our current bylaw. And it says a fence, hedge, or wall or other enclosing structure within the lot lines may be maintained on a corner lot, blah, 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 blah. So we regulate it on a corner lot now. She's just providing us what she thinks is clearer
okay,
language.
just curious.
Yeah, that's probably the only, I mean, there's other things like in large home review, we can review landscaping and condition it. And obviously on the commercial projects, we can review landscaping and condition it, but we don't, hedges are not structures per se in other parts of the bylaw, I don't think.
Yeah, no, it's sort of the lawyer's point perhaps, which is what makes us such interesting people. But so
We need to
then
all get lawyers.
I don't want to take up too much of everyone else's time with this. Does anybody else have anything further for Tom on Article 5? Hearing none, are we comfortable voting on Article 4 and Article 5? Hearing no objection, if somebody would like to make a motion in the form, does the advisory committee recommend that special town meeting approve Article 13 zoning bylaw - amend Article 4 use regulation in the form it appears in the warrant, the final special town meeting warrant?
So moved.
Fran, a second?
Second.
Mary, discussion? Hearing none, vote by roll call. Gina Stino,
Gina Stino, aye.
Mike Barclay,
Mike Barclay, aye.
Mark Cameron,
Mark Cameron, aye.
Fran Collins,
All right,
Mark Maggi,
Mark Maggi, aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Mary McGoldrick, aye.
Okay, it carries. So we'll move on to what Tom has been referring to as Article 5. It's we take a motion in the form. Does the advisory committee recommend the special town meeting approve Article 14 zoning bylaw, amend Article number 5 dimensional regulations in the form it appears in the final special town meeting warrant? So move. Gene, a second, perhaps?
all right,
Fran, discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote by roll call. Gina Stino,
Gina Stino, aye.
Mike Barclay,
Mike Barclay, aye.
Mark Cameron,
Mark Cameron, aye.
Fran Collins,
all right,
Mark Maggi,
Mark Maggi, aye.
Mary McGoldrick,
Mary McGoldrick, aye.
and Rob Hillman. I too am an I. Thank you, Tom.
All right, thank you all. I appreciate it. I want to mention one thing. The bylaw committee is meeting Wednesday, the 8th. I don't know if that conflicts with you guys, but you can listen to it on tape afterwards. But we are having a meeting with our consultant that the town was given on the mass housing choice legislation. And their contract is up soon, so this is the last time for us to meet publicly with them. They're going to show us their recommendations of the potential overlay district for the housing choice legislation. We have directed them to look at an overlay on 3A commercial areas, not to develop these in a residential area. And we have to be in certain proximity to either Cohasset Station or North Situate Station. And they're going to show us what they recommend as the boundaries of an overlay district on that night. So that'll be the only topic we're dealing with. So, but it's of great interest, I think, to everybody, because we probably will come forward with the necessary zoning bylaw changes to implement housing choice in the spring.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that, and we'll we have a meeting scheduled for that evening, but when it, that having that stuff available to us online to look at when we need to speak to it is important, and actually it's super helpful, compared to trying to read minutes of meetings or remembering who said what at a live meeting 6 months prior. So, well, thank you.
All right, thank you all again. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for stopping by. All right. Zounds, we're ahead.
Good.
And we may not have much more to do. So the next item on the agenda is a discussion of the annual budget message. Now, I know the select board is engaged in putting together a budget message, and I know, the function of the budget message is to give direction to the professional staff in drafting a proposed budget for approval at annual town meeting in May. From where I sit, and I'm happy to hear what anybody else thinks, is that prior to this town meeting and the subsequent election, given the number of things that will shape the budget in a variety of ways, particularly creating pools of money for capital that could affect how the budget is constructed. It may be a little premature, but if people think otherwise, I would say I can circulate last year's budget message, last year's select board budget message, this year's draft select board budget message, and we could take it up on November 8th. Thoughts?
I think given the moving pieces, that's a good thought to set it aside till the 8th.
Okay. At least until the 8th.
At least until the 8th, if not after the special meeting, so that we can see what actually happens, so the message can be drafted, based on those results.
On a kind of a new reality, or the lack of a new reality. Mary?
Just curious, has there been any thought to, depending on what happens at special town meeting, the long range planning group convening to address, in case things don't go, for example, as the select board has indicated by their votes that they would like them to go, just to address a lot of failing infrastructure around town?
I think that group would regroup in that form or some similar form and continue to address it. I mean, the problems aren't going to go away. In fact, even if everything passes, there may be reasons to continue to have a group kind of bird dogging long-term planning, capital and budget issues, and, being ready for, things that may happen in connection with other, other and ongoing issues. So is there a current plan? I couldn't, not specifically. I think there was a lot of work to get where we are now. And I think everybody, I can't speak for everybody else in that group, but I think right now we're working with our different committees like this, and trying to get information out to the public, solid, good information, data rather than, conclusions. And I think we would reconvene after, whether all of it passes or some of it passes or some of it passes. Is that a fair answer? Does that work? Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I agree with Mike and your take on it. I don't think there's, because I think the message is going to be vastly different.
I just,
No,
yeah.
no less fiscally conservative probably, but vastly different.
So, and there are some things, we ought to give some thought to. We have for years been talking about the reserve fund, which is, the little pot of money to which the advisory committee is the gatekeeper. And we occasionally get asks to fund things. They have to be relatively emergent, and they typically are. Failing elevators, threatening to create environmental problems, 100-year-old pipes that fail, things like that. We have asked that it be increased for years just to get it consistent with the policy. And we never do anything about it. So sort of before I'm done here, we ought to make a decision to bring that forward, either to make a stink is the wrong word, to make the pitch to have it increased, or to adjust the policy down to the reality. And the latter may be the realistic way to go. I don't know. Chris, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yep.
We'll go with no. But that's also an unfair question, because I didn't forecast that point in any way prior to this meeting. But
So you can talk to the finance director at the next meeting, which would be me. So, and we can talk about it then.
okay. So I'm going to propose, unless anybody thinks otherwise, that we have a meeting posted for the 8th. Unless there's something really unusual happens between now and then. Chris, I see your hand.
The only thing I might ask, so the select board is not, the chair, Gene Dippold has prepared a draft of a budget. The select board hasn't taken
There is
nothing.
something we've
But they haven't taken it, so they pushed it back till the end of November, till after town meeting.
Okay.
And they had much the same conversation you did. That said, I think it'll be helpful to at least, if you have the ability to maybe start that conversation. Because it's going to get real tight after Thanksgiving. So if you can at least just start the budget conversation, that would be great. Things of us you can ask us.
There is also, there's that, but there's also something else we should probably discuss on the 8th. I think it'll be a short-ish meeting, but more so than almost any town meeting, certainly since I've been on advisory, the advisory committee should probably speak to some of these articles, the big five for sure, briefly, succinctly, and but that's our job. Now, granted, the last 2 times we've done that, our point of view has not been successful. And I feel a little like, who was it? Henry Clay, who ran for president 4 times or 3 times, lost all 3 times and said, I'd rather be right than president. Well, we're the Henry Clay of committees. Now, I got to watch how I say that, because I'm sure that Clay had some political views that are wildly unacceptable at this point. But leaving that aside, I think we should probably convene on the 8th as planned to see if there are any developments that need our attention, but also to determine, by, volunteer or otherwise, which of the articles we will specifically address, and ask a member to sort of present the consensus view, as I've done with the budget, Fran did, Mike did with town hall. Does that sound? We could probably get that meeting up and down in an hour. So I think we should probably do it. I don't want to just cancel meetings right prior to town hall, special town meeting. Yes, no, thumbs, nods, a lack of people throwing things at their camera. So I'm going to I'll take that as a positive. There are some minutes that were floated, but I didn't distribute them. I'll just include them in our next meeting. And unless anybody has any other business, I think we can throw some time back here. Mary?
I just have a quick question. I got a note, from the, oh my Lord, my brain isn't working. Just regarding the minutes, does Leontina send those out, or is somebody on the committee responsible once they're approved to put them in PDF form and send them to town hall?
I believe that she is sending them to town hall for us. I asked that question and the response I got indicated to me that she was doing it, which makes, oh, I see her hand. And three participants, lots of participants raised their hand. Okay. One of them's Mike. Leontina, why don't you talk to us about minutes? How did I misrepresent what you do?
No, I will, in fact, I did send the last two that have been approved at the prior two meetings. Once I get an approval, I can send them on. When I need to, because in addition to the meetings, if there's any information that's being presented that wasn't publicly available, or certainly not by the time I finish the meetings, then I have to include it. But once I get the approval, I will then send it in the PDF format. I think I copied you, Mr. Hillman, on my last one. I can make sure to also copy you, the vice chair. But I will send them once I hear they've been approved.
Okay.
You did. I
Um,
appreciate that. I'm
there
sorry,
are,
Mary, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I was interrupting you. I'll shut up now.
There are minutes in the queue. They're not in the queue. There are minutes that were approved that were taken. I think it was the April 12 minutes, some minutes that Ellen took that were before Leontina was gracious and started to help the committee. So I'll just make sure those get to town hall.
Okay.
Thank you. I saw Mike, then Mark Maggi.
Yeah, no, I was just curious, have liaison assignments been handed out yet?
No, well, let's put that on the agenda for the next meeting, Mike. That makes loads of sense. I'll circulate the current ones and we'll do that. Thank you. That's important. Ordinarily, we would have started that already, except for this unusually action-packed and short time frame town meeting. So let me put that in my notes. Mark Maggi, goes to Mark Cameron.
I appreciate your commitment to pronouncing my last name correctly.
It only took me a year, but I've got it nailed now.
You do. Just so I'm clear, the only meeting that we're going to have between now and special town meeting is the 8th, is 2 weeks from today.
That's the only one we have. We scheduled. We've approved every. We've done a recommendation on every warrant article. The budget message would be our other business item, and the special and the assignments that Mike just brought up, the liaison assignments, is the other usual September business. So I was thinking on the 8th, we could deal with which articles do we want to speak to a town meeting and who. Second, liaison assignments. Third, maybe a preliminary discussion of the budget message, which we would deal with creating one or finalizing one after the vote. But if you have other ideas, I'm
no, that's fine. I previously mentioned there's probably a good chance I won't be at the meeting on the 8th, so I hate to miss our last meeting before town meeting. I
was about to suggest we forego it, because we have done all the substantive work we're going to do. So I don't think we're going to be making any decisions there that'll affect the substance of our message to town meeting. If there are any of the warrant articles to which you would like to present, you don't have to answer that right this second, but let me know and I'll make sure you're in the mix.
If there was one I was going to speak on, I'd speak on town hall unless Mike wants it again. He could just keep going back up to that plate and swing at fastballs.
All yours, Mark.
If I was going to speak to it, did we ever really net out where sort of the revenue situation is? Is this revenue neutral, revenue offsetting, positive revenue? Like, if I'm going to get up there, it's like, listen, if it just generates some revenue, that's more than
it's more than none.
Yeah. Is it? Some is more than none, but that's not. It was being phrased as a revenue generator, not a revenue offsetter. So if I'm going to speak to something, I'd be curious. I'd want to know that conclusively.
Yes. I'll let Chris address that for now, but I think we would sharpen that considerably before you're standing in. I mean, no one's going to be peppering you with questions, but yeah, you want to have a factual basis for what you're saying. So Chris, what's the short answer to Mark's question? in its
So the short
current
answer,
analysis.
there was a joint meeting with the steering committee and members of the Affordable Housing Trust last night and the Progressive Housing Authority to talk about the affordable housing piece of the building. And the CBC is meeting again this next Monday to talk about that. So I think, Mark, that number is being polished because I think that the conversation is what I should all of the units be effectively deeded to be affordable, small A or big A affordable housing for it. Because right now only 4 of them are going to be that way, but there's talk about, so that's going to change the dynamics a little bit. That said, Michelle did a nice PowerPoint last night, which I can send you, which gave what the rents would be based on affordable, the minimums, and they're pretty. So it gives, and we've also gotten better information on property management and insurance and all of that. So we have a better idea of how the numbers work. So there is I think if you, I get you that PowerPoint, and I think having a conversation with Michelle in the next week, if you have a few minutes, would be good, because she's working directly on getting some of those numbers up. It's looking like when I say cash positive, the units will pay for themselves, right? And there'll be spin-off that will go into, if the select board's going to set up a fund, so all the rents go into that for the upkeep of the building, and the building is the whole building, right? And there'll be a property manager who'll be paid a fee, and there'll be money set aside for repairs for the units, and money set aside for the requirements for a lottery and the screenings of tenants and a lot of other stuff too. So that's getting further and further along, but I think Michelle is the person to talk to.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll think about any others that people may be interested in. You can ping me with an email, or we can just discuss it at the meeting. We will not engage in serial deliberation over it, but Chris?
I have one other thing about so if any of you are interested in helping to spread the word on any of these projects, which you may, as members of the committee, but have voted in favor of, or as private citizens would like to help, we're going to be doing some signups for people to go to the RTF over the next few weekends. Take a little shift and maybe hand out some materials or hold a sign or something so people can see the QR code, just to kind of raise awareness of the town meeting is coming up, how important it is, and what some of the information is. So with the select board's having kind of a work session tomorrow at 5 online, and then we talk about some of the details of this. So if any of you have any interest in doing that, or if you have a group that you're a member of in town, we have one-pagers on all the projects. We have a one-pager on the financial report, like the summary of the summary, and there's QR codes that we can put on that are on these too, that will link you back to the town's website for anyone who takes them. So if anybody wants any of those kinds of materials to distribute in their neighborhoods, or their soccer fields on Saturday, or
I was going to say, I keep harping on this. This is the last weekend of town soccer, and Saturday looks like a beautiful day. I'd hand out flyers, except I'm going to be coaching, but I know it's a lot of the soccer parent generation that often derails these things at town meetings. So if we could get some flyers in their hands on a Saturday morning, I think it could only help. I'd offer to do it, but I'm otherwise occupied with a non-paying town position that day.
No, I appreciate it. But if there's anything else like that, Mark, you want some flyers, we can print them out for you. You can also download them yourself and print them out at home if you want, but we can print them for you. At the same time, so the select board is going to the trunk or treat on Friday night. And then there's another touch-a-truck. I don't know if you knew that, Mark. There's a touch-a-truck on Sunday. So the select board's going to be there too. And we're all going to be there as well, helping with that. So there's going to be a push to get to young parents as well. One of the things that one of the select board members said is that the fields are great, but if people are going to watch their kids, they don't want to hear you talk about anything else. So having materials there is great. I think we're going to try to, if this is the last weekend of that, we're going to, I think maybe get a couple poster boards up there so people can scan the QR code at least if they want and read it at their own leisure.
I mean, I take Mark's point very much to heart. I agree that walking up to people and trying to buttonhole them while they're trying to watch their child play soccer is counterproductive. Well, depending on how many soccer games they've watched so far this year, but I think having a table with a couple of people sitting at it saying,
you almost have to go through that one narrow gate by the bathrooms there.
We've got materials and we'll answer your questions. Somebody asked me, would it be appropriate for members of the advisory committee to do that? I think it would be. We have already voted. We have voted to support these projects, and I think that explaining the factual basis for what we did and our logic is fine. It's not, I mean, you know, and as as individual citizens, we can be as political as we want, but in terms of you know, holding ourselves out there, depending on my, you know, the pushes and pulls of my time, if there is somebody who wants to set up that table with the printed material, I will, oh God help us, I will volunteer to sit at it. And you know, like Lucy and the Charlie Brown cartoons, you know, the psychiatrist is in, you know, municipal finance advice, 5 cents. I think Mark's, you know, he's said that more than a few times. Every time I hear it, I think he's spot on right. And I kind of put myself back in my Milliken Field years. And yeah, if I saw that table, I might wander over and say, oh, you know, and particularly, and we can don't want to have the long conversation, but in the absence of any meaningful newspaper that, I mean, once upon a time, there was a decently professional newspaper that most people who at least were conscious of public affairs read. Then they stopped reading it. Then it went out of business, or functionally out of business. So, you know, going to where those voters are is a good idea. So Chris, if we want to loop back, if anybody else is interested in that, you know, I'll make coffee. So
Yeah,
you know.
just contact my office. Let me know if you're, you know, we also talk about the RTF too. Not maybe not the table at the RTF, but maybe just some signs and people around the boutique or something. So, but if people are willing or able, or any other event, just contact my office. Justin is coordinating a lot of that, but just grab Tracy or me if I'm
Sure.
physically there.
I'll talk to Justin or Tracy. Thank you. Anybody else? Anything else on that front? The select board has a very interesting plan. I'll let you find that one out on your own. I don't trust myself to describe it quite accurately, but it's a tie into the Barbie movie. So God bless them. I think they're gonna go pretty far out on a limb in terms of getting people's attention and making the good case. Mary, I'm sorry, your hand was up.
No, I just can't wait to see who's going to be Ken, but moving forward on that one, I did catch the last capital budget meeting that I don't think they met last week, but maybe they did, but the one on the 11th. Chris, do you know when they're meeting again?
Monday.
Okay. I do think they're asking him a lot of questions, which is not a bad thing. But it will be interesting to see how things settle out there.
Yes. And you know, and I think one of the reasons to meet in 2 weeks to talk about our message is, you know, I hope that our friends on capital budget choose to vote their positions prior to town meeting. They have in the past scheduled a meeting immediately prior to town meeting and have voted their position on major items there and then gone to town meeting floor saying, here's what we got. I think if they do, I think we should listen carefully to what they have to say and why. And I don't think as a committee, it's our place to comment on what other committees do or decide. As individuals, we may have views. I don't know. I've been listening to their meetings. I'm not going to say anything about anything until they vote, but some of the logic that they're following on their positions on certain issues seems to have more to do with the town budget than the capital budget. And that's not that's our job. That's out of their lane. So you know, and I think reasonable adults can have that conversation. And obviously all of them have, as we do, every right to have a personal opinion and to articulate that at town meeting. And I don't want to get in a food fight with anybody, but I think we should listen carefully to what they have to say. And hopefully they'll have said it by the 8th. I think they have an obligation to say it by the 8th, much as I thought. I mean, when we do our best work, we would have addressed these zoning issues in time to get it in the warrant, but that just wasn't in the cards this time around. And don't see these zoning articles as being particularly controversial, which is good. But yeah, I'll just leave that there and we'll take that back up on the 8th. Anything else? All right. It's 8:20. Awesome. So I don't know. I would take another motion if somebody wanted to make it.
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 8:20.
And
Awesome.
I will second it.
Mark, Maggie, excellent. Then as we must vote by roll call, Gina Stino,
Gina Stino, aye.
Mike Barclay,
Mike Barclay, aye.
Mark Cameron,
Mark Cameron, aye.
Fran Collins,
All right,
Mark Maggie,
Aye.
Mary McGoldrick.
Aye.
And Rob Hillman, I too am an aye. We stand adjourned. Awesome, great. 2 weeks.